If you're someone who doesn't have experience with the game we're taking a look at today, I can understand if you're going to be a bit skeptical. Oh boy, I remember the last fantasy RTS Zade looked at, and it wasn't really that good. Oh no, it's also a movie licensed game. Made by EA. I don't really know about this one. But wait, let me stop you. What if I rephrase that a bit for you? Now, how would you like to take a look at a real-time strategy game based off the works of acclaimed author J.R.R. Tolkien, developed by the team who would go on to create both Command & Conquer 3 and Red Alert 3? Now you're more interested? Well, do me a favour and keep that optimism with you, because I think you're going to be in for a surprise when we jump into The Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2. Battle for Middle-earth 2 was developed by EA Los Angeles, a studio that you've most likely heard of one way or another. They've had a tumultuous past, to say the least. They've been making games since 1996 and have been renamed and restructured so many times throughout their history I've honestly lost track. And while today they are more of a support studio for mainline DICE series like Battlefield and Star Wars Battlefront, back in the mid-2000s they were a force to be reckoned with in both the FPS and RTS genres. Releasing the first Battle for Middle-earth title in 2004, the success warranted a sequel, which came to pass in February of 2006 as Battle for Middle-earth 2. Similar to its predecessor, it was a critical and commercial accomplishment, and players were once again able to enjoy Tolkien's fantastical world in an RTS setting, something that a lot of people would probably think difficult to achieve. Yet they did achieve it, and apparently they did so quite well. It even did well enough to warrant an expansion pack later that same year, The Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 2 expansion pack, The Rise of the Witch King. A bit of trivia, this is apparently the longest video game expansion name ever. It's easily the longest I've ever seen. I really don't envy the designer trying to fit all those words onto the game's cover. No matter, I'm sure both of them were impressive for 2006, but we're going to have to take more of a look at them to see if you should play Lord of the Rings The Battle for Middle-earth 2 in 2019. Now, just so anyone who's wondering knows, I'm playing Battle for Middle-earth 2 using its unofficial community patch, version 1.09, which fixes many bugs and updates certain visual effects and mechanics, and it's generally accepted that this is the best way to play the base game today. As for Rise of the Witch King, I'm doing a similar thing and using its unofficial community patch, version 2.02, which again is the recommended way to play it now. Okay, let's get into it. I've talked a few times in other videos about how much I've played Command & Conquer 3 in my day, and today we're going to be doing that again. Back in the video about Command & Conquer Generals, I spoke about how that felt quite similar to CNC 3, mainly because of the engine it was built on, as well as some gameplay factors like its upgradable units and rechargeable abilities, among some other things. And while Generals felt distinctly like a predecessor to CNC 3, Battle for Middle-earth 2 feels like it was built on exactly the same core, but made in a completely unique setting with its own little quirks to make it stand on its own. Battle for Middle-earth 2 is at its heart a traditional RTS. You've got your base building and resource gathering, you've got your armies fighting, you've got your researching, you get the idea. But the novelty to all this is that it's Lord of the Rings, so you're playing with elves, dwarves, goblins, Sauron, etc. All the fan favourites from the books and movies. There's 3 campaigns to play, with good and evil ones in the base game, and the third one in the Rise of the Witch King expansion. There's a skirmish mode, and a turn-based game called War of the Ring, which is similar to what you've seen in games like Total War, if a bit more simplified here. Starting with the campaigns, you can play the base games 2 in either order, as they're independent from each other, though you'll obviously need Rise of the Witch King to play its one. I began with the base game's Good campaign, and right off the bat I was impressed by its production value on display. Hugo Weaving both reprises his role as Elrond from the films, and voices the narrative exposition between missions, and his credibility lends a lot to the game's story. There are others reprising their roles from the movies here too, such as Christopher Lee, Elijah Wood, and Ian McKellen. all who do an excellent job in making Battle for Middle-earth 2 feel wholly legitimate, and not just a cash-in on the Lord of the Rings license. The campaign missions are also surprisingly interesting, with a unique range of scenarios that stay entertaining throughout its runtime, and its familiar characters that lend to its credibility as stories in the Lord of the Rings universe. And while the skirmish mode does lack the context that the campaign enjoys, the gameplay holds fast on its own, with 6 different factions to players in the base game, with an extra one added in the expansion. Battle for Middle-earth 2 features all the RTS accoutrements you've come to expect from a quality title, all things you've undoubtedly heard before, like an assortment of captivating units and buildings, unique and interesting factions, and balanced gameplay between them all. But almost all of its recognisable elements have small twists that make them feel fresh, like the fact that infantry units are built in large squads, making clashes feel like real battles between potentially hundreds of soldiers. But what it does to truly distinguish itself from other RTSs is more interesting, and it makes the gameplay far deeper than what it may seem on the surface. Firstly, there's a hero system where you can recruit familiar Lord of the Rings characters to the battlefield, who level up through combat experience and have powerful abilities that unlock as you do so. It's really reminiscent to what's in Warcraft 3, except here the abilities are predetermined. They range from simpler ones like heal allies in a certain vicinity, to the far more exhilarating summon a literal thunderstorm that eviscerates all your enemies in its radius. And since you can have multiple heroes on the field at once, battles can become a lot more tactical, as using the right ability at the right time could swing the tide of that battle. And there's more. The game also features a point system similar to the star system that was in Command & Conquer Generals, where you can unlock special powers that can be used throughout the game. While similar to the hero abilities, they're different in the fact that you can actually choose what path you want to take and what ones you want to invest your points into. They're also a lot more versatile, and some are insanely awesome. Who doesn't like summoning a gigantic underground squid monster to crush your enemies, or calling a fire-breathing dragon to set them all alight? They're all just so much fun to use, and they add a whole new level of strategy to a game that's already doing a lot to be deeper than most. There's also a laundry list of small details that add to the overall enjoyment of the gameplay, like how mounted units and trolls will charge through and annihilate foot soldiers, making unit positioning and countering extremely important and really effective. Or how when you summon a giant eagle, they actually swoop down to pick up enemies, only to toss them away like a leaf on the wind from 50 feet in the air. That makes the whole battleground feel much more alive, and not just a bunch of 3D models swinging swords in each other's direction. Now when you're looking at the base game and the expansion, it's honestly up to you which one you want to play. While The Witch King isn't a standalone title, it does make some changes to the base game which some don't prefer. Obviously, if you want to play the 3rd campaign or use the 7th faction, then you'll be required to use the Witch King expansion. But if not, it's really down to what version of the game you personally like. There are communities for both, and while the general gameplay is pretty much interchangeable, there are some minute details that may affect your decision, like balance changes, new units, and more. Now I don't claim to be an expert on them, as I'd never played either of them before making this video. So if you're wondering what to do, I'd probably start with the base game and go from there to form your own opinion. But you can rest assured that whichever you choose, expansion or not, a game of Battle for Middle-earth 2 is just really fun. Building and expanding your base is satisfying, and the inevitable combat between what are often large armies that follows is tactical, exciting, and surprisingly deep, especially because of the additions of hero units and unlockable powers. Battle for Middle-earth 2 tries a lot of things to make its gameplay loops more exciting, and in my opinion, it succeeds in doing so. If you've watched previous videos of mine, you'll know I love the Sage engine. Love it. Command & Conquer 3 has some of my favourite effects in any RTS, and one of the best parts about CNC Generals for me were again its effects. And you can probably tell at this point, Battle for Middle-earth 2 is built on that same engine, and I love it just as much here as I have in other games. I honestly think this game feels more similar to CNC 3 than Generals does, and as far as I'm concerned, that's positive praise. The graphics in Middle-earth 2 obviously aren't incredible nowadays, but they hold up well enough where it doesn't feel like you're playing a super old game, and they've also been boosted a bit by the way of the community patches you'll most likely be playing on. Units and building designs are both great, but it's those classic Sage engine effects that really make it all stand out. Everything from flaming arrows to crumbling buildings are a feast for the eyes, and the crazier powers and hero abilities really let the game flex its visual muscles. The sight of a massive dragon landing and spewing fire at your enemies never gets old, and the impressive effects just amplify the power of these abilities, and they all feel extremely impactful. And like in the gameplay, it's the small details that make all the difference, and add a lot to the game's presentation. Units go flying when they're hit by rocks or explosions, siege engines move slowly and feel very weighty, soldiers cheer when a battle is won or when a friendly hero appears. It's just things like this that really show that a lot of effort and care was put into the game's development, and it's something that I really appreciate. The game's audio is no different. It's all very high quality and things sound just like you'd expect. Swords clash with intensity, and environmental effects crunch down with devastating force. The soundtrack is also excellent, and if you've seen the films, then you'll be in for a familiar experience. But I don't say that as a bad thing, at all. The score to Lord of the Rings is dramatic, memorable, and really effective, and Battle for Middle-earth 2's OST fits that bill perfectly. While some tracks from the film were used in a few places, most of it is from its original soundtrack. The composers did a terrific job in making a score that both feels uniquely its own, while still being familiar with what people have heard before. And the last thing I want to talk about here is the voice acting. And while at times it's somewhat hit or miss, it's mostly solid. Like I said, Hugo Weaving does a great job in voicing his character from the films, as well as narrating the cutscenes in the base game's campaigns. And the other actors reprising their roles are of similar quality. While most voices for units and other hero characters are good enough, there are some that to me feel like they're overacting a bit.
The elf witch Galadriel and her foolish mate grace us with their presence. Such exquisite pleasure.
Overall, the game's audio-visual package matches the gameplay perfectly, in that it's of high quality and feels just like you would want an RTS set in the Lord of the Rings universe to, while also standing on its own for those who may not just be satisfied by its authenticity to the universe it's set in. Man, this script has turned into one of, if not the longest ones I've ever written for a Should You Play video, which was honestly wholly unexpected. And those two words sum up my experience with Battle for Middle-earth 2 and its expansion perfectly. Having never played either of them before, I didn't think they would be paragons of the genre. I anticipated a game that would be a decent RTS that mostly got its praise just from the fact that it was a fairly okay game set in the Lord of the Rings universe. Boy was I wrong. I enjoyed every minute of my time spent in Battle for Middle-earth 2. Whether I was playing through its high quality campaigns or engaging in entertaining skirmish battles with familiar characters and heroes I knew from the films. And this is coming from someone who's not even a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I've seen the movies a few times, but I've never read the books, and I definitely consider myself a normie of the fan base. So if you listening are a devotee of the universe, you can be sure to get even more out of it than I did. As for availability, it's unfortunately not available to buy digitally anymore, so you'll need to find other ways to get it, either via disc or otherwise. It also needs a little bit of work to get running on a modern PC, but nowhere near as much as some older games require. And if you want to give it a try, I've linked a forum in the description which explains it all in great detail and includes all the community patches as well as how to play it online. It's quite simple and will probably only take you half an hour or so to get it all up and running. Battle for Middle-earth 2 is the best fantasy RTS I've ever played, so if you're looking for something to scratch that itch, I'd recommend you give it a try, even if you're not a Lord of the Rings superfan, which I certainly am not. It's definitely one of the better RTSs I've tried out recently, and I can easily see myself playing some more with friends after I've finished this video. And while it is a shame there's no digital release, as far as remasters go, I honestly don't feel like the game needs it. There's a widescreen fix included in the community patches, and there's even HD mods you can download that increase the game's visual quality, though the one for the Witch King expansion is still being worked on as of this video. So if you like the look of it, I'd recommend you give it a try. And let me know your thoughts on playing it in 2019 down below. Do you still play it today? I'd love to hear if you do. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy my content, then be sure to subscribe. Also, if you have any games you'd like me to look at, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. You can also follow me on Twitter for updates on the channel, and follow me on Twitch for regular live streams. Links are in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.